This is Restless.
Welcome back to Restless, your home for the postmortem on the young, restless, and reformed. I am your host, Matt, joined by Pastor Michael, and we are broadcasting in the glorious era of dress shirts and sweatpants. How are you today, Michael?
I'm doing well. I'm in the church library. That's where I'm recording from. Nobody else can see that because we don't put these videos up. But I do have my computer sitting on top of some of Calvin's commentaries. And I like to think that that is symbolic and that hopefully John Calvin is looking down on us from heaven and saying, what you guys are doing is super rad. I can imagine he's probably saying that right now.
That's a great shirt. John Calvin thinks we're super rad. This podcast is truly reformed and is based on the most important tenets of Calvinism. Today, though, we are maybe not talking about something that is kind of our normal bread and butter, but I think as we go on, we're going to hit more and more subjects like this. Today, we are discussing celebrity culture.
Yeah, this seemed to be a topic that we needed to get into eventually because it's part and parcel of American life, the internet revolution, and because of that, this American evangelical movement called New Calvinism.
When we record these episodes, at the end of our recording, we often find ourselves saying, oh, we need to do this, we need to do this. We find like 3 more subjects we have to cover, and at the end of almost every single one, we've said, man, we need to hit on celebrity culture. And so we are going to do 2 or 3 episodes on it, and we're looking forward to do it. And so let me start by helping everyone in our audience and Michael and I get on the same page about what is celebrity culture, right? It is important, and it's probably like a lot of the things we do. We are describing water to fish. It's just all around us. It is life in America. It is American cultural life, right? It is the celebrity culture on its most basic level is this high volume and high like penetration of celebrities into our daily lives and us seeing their personal lives and being interested. And obviously this is connected to the kind of consumer brands they represent and then the person themselves kind of making themselves something they sell to us. Michael, is there anything you would want to add about just what a celebrity is? Maybe what the most basics of what your understanding of celebrity culture is?
I guess even as you were just saying all that, I was thinking about how this really isn't new in the sense of elevating certain individuals to a particular status where they are seen in, as if they are, kind of above everyone else or have some kind of special talent or ability. And so they are praised and set apart in a particular way because of that. So this isn't new, right? I mean, this is why we still have stories of, Achilles, why we still talk about Alexander the Great. And I don't know, there's always been, certain people that rise above others as being noteworthy in some way. And I don't know if this is the best time to get into this, but I do think that what makes what we're talking about more particular is the fact that this normal human desire to kind of lift up some and, those who have proven themselves in some way and seen them as, worthy of respect because of it, that has been, usurped with kind of the internet social media revolution into this person is much like what Ray Bradbury has in Fahrenheit 451, where you have your family, which are these images of people on screens that you interact with in your home, right? Like it's much become like that, right? You have your phone, you have your computer, and you can almost pretend like this person is right here with me, and so they're important to my life.
Yeah, I think when we use the phrase celebrity culture, we're obviously referring to kind of a modern phenomenon, and I think the 3 things that it requires is this: 1, It requires mass media for there to be the kind of proliferation of it into our lives, right? On every screen. I can know what they're doing because of social media. 2, it requires the commercialization of that fame, right? The motivating factor of getting them in everything is me buying something, right? Corporate interests. And then 3rd, the modern Western expression is an expression of our fascination with the entertainment industry. So whether that's sports, film, right, music, that is the primary set apart area. Though with the full social media revolution, the understanding of celebrity on those platforms has also changed.
Yeah, I guess you even see that, right? As people maybe begin to see certain like political figures who they interact with online or who they now follow on social media, they become these important figures. And even with the movement of Donald Trump into the presidency, you see kind of an overlap of this. And I guess you could go back. Ronald Reagan was an actor, right? But
right.
Like it does seem like there is this meshing or melding of the kind of entertainment world and the political world. This is why you have entertainers who are always coming out in support or against certain political actions or political figures because they have some kind of status or perceived authority.
Yes. And maybe that's the other thing that we, especially as we talk about this in regards to New Calvinism, because of celebrity culture, or maybe it's a feature of it, whatever's the right way to think about it, we grant them some authority. So it matters what Tom Hanks thinks about climate change, right? We've granted them some kind of influence. So, and which is interesting, right? There's, since film has existed in the early 1900s, there has been a, obsession. Like there's been an interest in the people in those things. But now we have the internet to totally disperse that information constantly to everyone about it. And now that has caused me to, maybe because they're the most visible to me, maybe because I have a perceived sense of trust, I have granted them a level of authority on things that have nothing to do with movies, politics, dieting, all, religion, right? You can list anything. Right,
they become basically like a family member, right? So this is like a father or a mother or a grandparent or a brother or sister who's telling me, hey, you should check this out. Hey, look what I just got from the store. Hey, here, eat this, right? It's something that maybe normatively you would just have someone in your direct, immediate community, and now all of a sudden that's been expanded outward. I also want to say, I don't know if this is a little bit of a tangent, but I can't help but think about it. We're almost at this point where, because of the rise of social media and everybody has a camera or recorder of some kind in their pocket all the time. Now with the onset of YouTube celebrity and Instagram and all of these things, everybody making a podcast which becomes your favorite and you listen to and you appreciate, which is not a bad thing. I just want to say that up front.
That's right. Subscribe, rate, and review the Restless podcast.
Please tell your friends about this podcast.
Yep.
No, but we're almost at this point where that celebrity is it is starting to move out to the farther reaches, right? It's not as centralized as it once was. And I don't know if we're at the point where we can really see where that's going to go. I'm sure that was, connected to the rise of New Calvinism with these, guys who in any other part of the world would not be known for anything. This is in a subset of culture within evangelicalism. You have these men arise. But I do wonder if we're seeing a point where that's going to change even more.
And I'll say two more things about the current form of celebrity culture before Pastor Michael tells us why this is the subject he wanted us to discuss, right? That it is interesting as you describe it as kind of filling this familial community need that is normal, but now it's being filled in these relationships. It's very important to understand, while it doesn't feel this way to us with a normal celebrity or with even these kinds of right? Even you with us on this podcast and the podcast I listen to, it doesn't feel this way, but it is a purely one-sided relationship. The listening you do, the right, we're like, we could says our podcast, let's have a conversation, or people get on some live stream social media app and I just wanted to talk to my friend. No, it's purely one-sided, right? And I think that that's a really important thing to hold in mind. And the other thing that has happened with the most current form is that it is self-aware. We've become self-aware this culture exists and is influencing us. And the people, right, this is why people try and become an influencer on Instagram. People are self-consciously going to position themselves in this. And so one of the ways you can tell this happens is, as the research I was reading says, there are now what we call infamous celebrities. And these are the celebrities we love to hate, right? So because we find celebrity so important, what you need to be able to have that is you need to have people who are famous, but we think they don't deserve to be. Because we give so much esteem to fame, we think, oh, these people, though, they're not worthy of the fame and attention we give them, even though we still give it to them. Pop culture examples we have are like the Jersey Shore cast, Kim Kardashian, right? These people that they get tons of attention, but everyone kind of knows that's, they don't, right? And you can think about it on a smaller scale. Like there are certain Christian leaders who we all know are going to say kind of clown things, and people still follow them and still quote tweet their stuff and kind of troll their stuff, even though it's just an expression of that, I think, in the kind of evangelical subculture.
Yeah, go on Reform Twitter for like 1 minute, and basically it's everybody sharing the same bad tweet from some other, Christian leader that they disagree with.
Exactly.
Or, which is, something to talk about in itself sometime.
You don't need Reformed Twitter, as we said. You have Restless.
Yes.
So, Pastor Michael, why, in regards to New Calvinism, was this the next subject to bring in?
So recently on the show, we've talked about how it was something that came to our minds that in lieu of having some kind of denominational distinctive or confessional standing, one of the things that happened within New Calvinism and evangelicalism as a whole is that particular personalities become the new tribe, the new confession. And so, you are known by which of these particular well-known teachers you follow and kind of subscribe to. And I think that what this does, in a sense, in a culture that already likes to take personalities and kind of exalt them to places that they probably shouldn't be, right? Giving them authority that they actually don't have, or making it seem as though they have some kind of expertise in an area that they don't have. In a culture that already does that, when that comes into the church, what I think happens is more, at least potentially more damaging and pernicious than it would be outside of the church, because we're not dealing with what toothpaste you should buy, right? Or, what streaming service you should start using. What we're dealing with is whether or not you will spend eternity with God, worshiping him, or under his wrath. We're dealing with who God is and how to know him and what man is supposed to be. We're dealing with eternal issues, right? Things that are going to affect you forever.
Yeah.
And so when someone in that capacity is lifted up and exalted to a place that maybe they should not have in your life, when they are treated as, maybe closer than they actually are, or having more authority than they actually do, I think it can be extremely damaging.
Yeah, you're saying that because when we are dealing with the ultimate things of God, right? We mean that on a like ultimate in standard, ultimate in truth, and ultimate in your eternal destiny and fate. We better be really sure about the method by which we are going about walking that path, to lack a better term, right? The guides you have matter eternally. And so leaving it to who's winning in branding is a very dangerous thing.
Yeah, so judgments are made that are not based upon, biblical revelation, or like how you would normally want to weigh these kinds of things. And I think that part of this, I think this is true of celebrity culture in general, but especially bringing it home to the church. I think that one of the reasons we do this is because we are a very immature people. And we have this kind of, with immaturity often comes a kind of idealism about the world, where we have these abstract principles that we say we're going to live by no matter what, and this is the way things are supposed to be, so they better be this way, right? And so you're in this position of idealism, and you look out at your church, and you say, well, my pastor's sermon was boring, and I was kind of falling asleep during the prayer, and I really don't like a lot of the people that are in the pews next to me, and man, this kind of music that we're singing is not what I would think is going to actually bring people in, or that we would enjoy more, or that that I think God is most honored by. And so there's all of these problems that I can see. But then I find online this pastor who seems to be saying all the right things. And everything that I watch from them, they seem like they have it all together, and their church must be great because this is the kind of this is the branding, right? This is what I see on the outside. And so everything must be going really well for them. In other words, then, we're doing something wrong, but they're doing it right. And so we need to start doing it like them. I need to follow them because they have it together, right? They know where they're going. They know how to do it. They know how to serve God best. So maybe I should be following them.
Let me pause just right here. If you're a listener and you don't have in mind one of the podcast feeds you subscribe to right now, you need to think about who you feel this way about, right? It could be an old new Calvinist. It could be Matt Chandler. It could be Tim Keller. It could be someone else now, though, if you have been disenchanted by those things. But I guarantee this is playing a role in in what you think about the state of the church compared to what you consume online.
So this is a concept that I think a lot about, that I call, virtual reality. And virtual reality obviously is not something I made up. Obviously, you've heard that phrase before. But in my mind, I use this as a kind of a categorical way of understanding anything that disconnects you from the immediate or the source of what it is you're consuming. And so in this way,
so a tangible, physical, present reality.
That's right. So it's you're disconnected from the real, and there's something in between that is making you see the world through some kind of rose-colored glasses, or seeing it in a way that's not actually the case. So in this case, what you have is this. You go online, and this is a well-known sociological fact, right? That social media often produces depression in people because they go on Facebook if they're older than 40, and then they go on Twitter or they go on Instagram, and they see all of their friends and all these other people they know and all these celebrities, and they're living their best life, and they're having such a good time, and they're working through all these issues, and everything looks so nice and sweet, and everything's going well for them. But in my life, things aren't going well, and I'm depressed, and I'm unhappy, and I don't like my job, and I'm not living my best life, and all of these things, and I'm not near as pretty as that. And so all of a sudden it creates this discontentment and this feeling of, well, everyone else has it together, but I don't. And this is, I think, what happens in the church too, is you look around, you say, well, I think my church is going the wrong direction, or, my elders or my pastor, like they're really making a mistake here. And then I see this other church somewhere else. And I don't see the really messy congregational meeting, and I don't see the church discipline that's going on. I don't see the power plays and the guilt manipulation that's going on. All I see is the branding, right? All I see is the good-looking stuff, the sermons that are edited down, and the well-produced music, and all of these things, and all that, like this beautiful website, and all of these great things that you can find on the website. They must have it all together.
Yeah.
But you're disconnected from what the reality probably is. Right. And this allows you, in a kind of immature idealism, to raise someone else up as if they have all the answers, they know what they're doing, whereas everything that I see around me just isn't in the same place.
And what's important is it's not that well-branded or, well put together online ministries or content are a sign there's something wrong.
Right.
But it is not necessarily a sign there's something right. Because again,
so let me say,
go ahead. I was going to say, the con example is Mars Hill Church, right? Driscoll was the best at this. One positive example, of course, is the Restless podcast, which, as you know,
yes,
is quite excellent at the online game. But what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to point out the fact that if you are listening to this podcast, we do edit it. There are things that we make mistakes on or, mess up, and sometimes we leave them in. A lot of times they get cut out. Sometimes when Matt asks me a question and I just sit here for a second because I have no idea what I'm going to say and I have to really think about it, that does not usually make it into the actual podcast.
And
also,
and
my
will
guess
this
is that,
make it?
Yes, and us talking over each other, which is going to make it now, right?
Right.
Now it has to. You have to include some of it. So that's not bad, right? We're not saying editing is bad. I don't even think branding is bad, right? No. Because I think that branding, in a sense, is just showing forth, like it's showing your reputation, right? It's a kind of open public resume of who you are, what you're like, and you don't have to include everything horrible about yourself in a resume, right? But it has to be real to who you actually are. That's the other thing. It can't be fake, right? So it doesn't have to include all the stuff you edit out, but it does have to be true and real. So your accomplishments can't just be perceived. They have to be something that you've earned. Otherwise, like, that's a bubble that inevitably is going to burst at some point.
Right. They're tools, which means they're things we can use. I do think before we talk about the direct intersection with this with New Calvinism, maybe the other important thing to say is, to some degree, obviously this form is related to some technology things, other cultural things going on. To look for leaders like this is somewhat natural, right? Israel asks, we want a king like the other nations, right? Why isn't Moses more well-spoken? The apostles are men of no repute, right? This is somewhat natural to us as humans, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to be very upfront and say I don't have a problem with somebody accumulating influence based upon their accomplishments, right? I don't have a problem with somebody proving themselves and thus gaining higher status as a leader. Okay, I am not an egalitarian. I'm not a strong proponent of kind of democratic virtues where everybody has a say in everything,
right?
And everybody is equal in how they think about things. I'm not at all. I have no problem with hierarchy, right? I know that's like a curse word in our society, but like I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with somebody who is the best at something, right, and proving that, then being able to speak into an issue as if they were the best.
Yeah.
That's totally fine by me.
What I'm realizing as we talk about this, as one of the reasons I love doing this show is I have realizations as we do it. Yeah, it's not that, Michael and I are not here to push for egalitarianism, pure democratization, though there's some of these things have good benefits, but what celebrity culture is it's because there are always going to be some degree of a hierarchy. It's just a deformed hierarchy.
I think so. Yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at it.
It's a deformed hierarchy. And so, Michael, do you think it's basically inarguable this intersected and was a big part of New Calvinism?
I think it's inarguable in the sense that like you can't escape it as a cultural phenomenon. Like we live in a culture, right? We live in a time and a place amongst a particular people, and that inevitably influences how we think, why we think the way we do. We have there's so many things working on us, the technology we have, the entertainment we consume, that inevitably it plays a role. Now, how much of a role, that's different depending on the case, right? So there's going to be some people who, really played into the celebrity and some people who didn't. Some people who, self-consciously tried to avoid it, right? That, it's going to be different in every case, and we don't want to necessarily, although we like sometimes using a broad brush, you could come back over that broad brush stroke of us saying the New Calvinism was in essence a part of celebrity culture, and we could put in some detail over top of that and say, well, over here not as much, and in this area maybe not as much, but generally speaking, I do think it's inarguable that celebrity culture heavily influenced the movement.
Right. And I think it's the self-aware social media iteration of celebrity culture. I think it is inarguable, right? Go back to our second part of our naming names episode. We discussed the biggest names in Colin Hansen's book, right? He organizes his investigation of New Calvinism around major figures, right? This is it was all about who was platformed where, who was one of the mainstay bloggers at the Gospel Coalition, who spoke at these big conferences, right? John Piper is a big deal because he was the great speaker to college students, right? I just think that, again, we're not saying it's all bad. I just think it is we need to examine this aspect of it. Let me just read one quote from Tim Challies that I think just shows the New Calvinist being self-aware of the influence of celebrity culture and also feeling kind of bad about it, but also not knowing what else to do. Challies says, "We have a love-hate relationship with celebrity culture. We who consider ourselves in the New Calvinism hate the idea of celebrity, but have no idea how to avoid the reality. We say we hate celebrity culture, yet stories about our celebrities dominate blogs, periodicals. A sure way to draw a massive amount of traffic is to write about each new scandal connected to celebrities. We see the dangers posed by a culture of celebrity, but also see that, to some degree, it's unavoidable. After all, there are men and women who we honor, respect, and look up to, who are worthy of our regard and worthy of the leadership we give them." And so he talks about, how he's been invited to talk on different things simply because of his notoriety, right? That he gets this authority transfer.
And listen, that is it is a hard place to be, right? Because you want to use the influence that God gives you for for His kingdom, for a purpose. If God gives you influence, I would use it. I would want to do something with it, right? And I think to be faithful, you have to, but you are in this really difficult position.
Yeah, I think the thing that has happened with celebrity culture in New Calvinism and probably evangelicalism as a whole is celebrity culture is our ecclesiology now. what are the principles? What are some of the big planks of what are the 8 marks of a celebrity culture ecclesiology? And here are just a few I thought of. Actually, we would love it if you're listening to the show and you think of one. We know we haven't gotten them all. We'd love to hear them because we'd love to collect the best ones somewhere. So here are a few of mine, and we'll see what Pastor Michael thinks of them. So you can stop me just, if there's one you want to talk about specifically. So one, we use our associations with a specific teacher to mark us the way denominations or confessions used to. We've already talked about this. 2, we look at those in these celebrity pastors as if they have authority on every issue. We look to celebrities to guide us regardless of their expertise on any specific subject.
Right. So that's the crossover of, Christian leaders, well-known pastors into the area of politics where maybe there's some overlap, or into, the area of entertainment, or, like there are these different kind of, moves.
Right. 3, we have my disagreement with a celebrity pastor is incredibly suspect, and I need to have a lot of evidence to back up my claim to prove that my disagreement is allowable, and preferably me be able to cite another celebrity pastor who agrees with me, right? You often the most pedestrian way you hear this is I say, I believe we should baptize children, and they go, John Piper, you're going to disagree with John Piper on this?
And we've heard that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you hear that
so
one.
John Piper's wrong, right? And then the simplest way people respond is, well, R.C. Sproul, or like we list other of these kinds of figures to disagree. Right. Number 4, opportunity to serve Christ is largely equated with to speak or write or be involved with one of these celebrity endorsed platforms. 5, the celebrities form a gatekeeper class. And so ordination is now receiving approval from this group of celebrities or being platformed by them.
Yeah, and if any of the major names want to plug Restless, we're right here, and we would welcome your endorsement. TGC, if you want to put us on the front page.
Yep.
New Young Restless Reformed podcast, we're right here for you.
Yep. TGC Gatekeepers, we love you. Love to have you on the show.
We'd love to have you.
No doubt. The way the church gathers with celebrity culture is via multi-site and conferences, because the presence in some form of a celebrity is a key element to how we worship.
Yeah. Huh.
7, this has created effectively a new hierarchy in church governance. There are normal shepherds serving, like Pastor Michael, and then they are functionally, their authority is overshadowed by the celebrity class of pastors. If Michael disagrees with a celebrity pastor, I'm probably unhappy with him.
Yes.
And then number 8, and again, like I said, there are probably more. Church discipline is done via mass media audience, especially for New Calvinists, social media. The censures can range from a strongly worded tweet to a blog where I take you apart, to deplatforming you if you were once with us, and then the final one, which is just pretending you don't exist online anymore.
Yeah, so my add-on to all of this is basically we have developed a new episcopal system, right, where you have basically new bishops, right? These celebrity pastors become the new bishop, right? When the bishop comes to your church, this is a big deal, right? You want to be a part of the communion service that this bishop brings, and he has particular authority to ordain, to platform, right? To allow certain people to speak and not others. It's also, a bishop is very often, given a particular, geographical area that they are over.
Yes.
So you have the Bishop of St. Louis, the Bishop of Chicago, and what do we have in the kind of typical New Calvinist celebrity pastor? Celebrity pastor, I'm not trying to use that as a smear. I don't want to paint with too broad a brush. I know that there are guys who we could list who would say they don't want that at all.
Right.
Like I know that many of these men are very humble servants of God. So that's not what we're trying to do. But from a cultural perspective, like you have basically new bishops. You have the Bishop of Minneapolis and the Bishop of Seattle and the Bishop of Manhattan and so on and so forth, right?
But that's why we need you to do a daily Ask Me Anything podcast, right? Like honestly, if
yeah,
and right, there aren't cathedrals, there are conferences where I go to get the kind of grace I can only receive in that location.
Right. The conferences are a particular thing. Like if you haven't been there, you don't understand like what God's doing, how he's acting. Like this is the real deal.
Yeah. Well, I think it's obvious if you're with us, right? We've just basically said like, hey, look, it has introduced a foreign ecclesiology to the church. Celebrity culture is our ecclesiology. And that's bad. But I think the other thing I've realized is that there are maybe two kind of features of it that we definitely see the deforming, not reforming, the deforming of the church because of it. I would say the first one is it has degraded the power and authority of the church. I mean that locally, and I mean that even on the universal level. Because now how we respond to ecclesiastical conflict or a problem is we do through the avenues of celebrity, right? A pastor, right? How does John Piper address Rob Bell? Twitter, right? These pastors, the church, the discipline of the church is now being done via social media, videos, and blogs. We tell our followers, don't listen to that person anymore, rather than through the courts of the church, where there is a biblical, structured method for doing church discipline of both members and elders. Now, Michael, this isn't our ad for Presbyterianism, and maybe this is a worse thing for Presbyterianism in this case. I give a little bit of grace to the evangelicals because this is all they have to do this kind of church discipline or accountability.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just thinking this as you were saying that. Like, what else are you going to do? Like what else can you do when you have an influential leader within your church because he's publishing books and he's platformed by, David C. Cook or like one of these like well-known evangelical publishers. And yet that what they're doing is wrong and you have zero, like there's no ecclesiastical connection where you can say, hey, I'm going to take this to the church court that is, over both of us because there's a problem here. You really don't have anything else. And so I really don't like, again, I don't want to blame a lot of these guys for doing this kind of stuff. It's literally all you have.
Right. The blameworthy thing actually does fall on confessional Reformed believers. If it's our people, which sometimes it is, are off base, then it is us not using the actual Reformed church courts to go after these things. And we still often retreat to the other ecclesiology, the celebrity ecclesiology.
Yeah.
Of, well, no, of course, you know how I feel about X contentious issue. You saw what I wrote about it. Right? You heard my podcast about it.
Yeah. Yeah, that strikes home, right? How many of the issues that are dealt with regularly on social media should be being dealt with in the courts of our church.
Right. And I think the other kind of issue is we do see it has to be, it becomes inherently tribal. And I know it. We use tribe as a positive way, and I'm not necessarily using it negatively. Like, who's my tribe, right? That's a. I don't know why. It's kind of it's another one of these things, right? Well, it happens for two reasons. One, Big Eva, even the biggest celebrities, especially the biggest new Calvinist celebrities. I know it's hard for you to believe, especially if you are like you've just been immersed in new Calvinism for years. These people are nobodies outside of our circles.
And this is just to, add on to some of what we were saying before. One of the things that happens when you do something like start a podcast or, start, doing one of these things, make a blog, is you realize that really doesn't take much.
Right.
Like it is, it's not anybody at this point, anybody can do it. And probably does,
right.
Like anybody can and probably does.
Right. A person saying, I have a podcast does not equate, I have an expertise I'm sharing with someone.
Right. Except in certain cases, when it has to do with niche theological movements, in which case maybe.
This podcast aside, of course, that doesn't happen. But
this podcast brought to you by also this podcast.
Yes.
We have no endorsements.
Exactly. We'll have to find a way to start like we've interviewed, not interviewed by, just like we've talked to. We convinced the person to get on and talk to us. But what that means is like Michael might listen to teachers I've never heard of, and because we use them to mark like who's orthodox and who's good, well, I actually don't even, they're not a big enough celebrity for me to even know, right? Like, obviously there are some that are big enough. If you're like, yeah, I get a lot from Joel Osteen, I'm going to go, my goodness, you might be lost, right? There are certain names that rise that are this well known, but we're all operating in all these little bubbles. And then the second thing is, as the YRR has splintered, this is why we're doing the show, because we've watched this, is once a group of people get together and do something I really disagree with, my recourse is I get my other group of friends together and I hold the counter conference, right? I hold the social justice or the anti-social justice contents or the grace conference, and I show the law and gospel conference, and it becomes this inherently tribal entity to counter the corrupt conference that used to be the good conference.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that this is, like you said, like this is inevitable within this system. And the answer to it really seems to be this need for like sound ecclesiology, right? Like a sound understanding of the church, what it's for, the proper boundaries within which pastors are supposed to operate, and under what authority they get to teach and preach. And it just shows the need, in this seems to arise because of a lack of, a sound or at least like clearly laid out ecclesiology that makes, that covers all of these issues, that covers these, like, what do you do if, this other pastor starts teaching something false? Is there a way to remedy that? That's not just go on social media. And if there's not, well, then that's all I can do. But you really need to have like a sound confession and a sound, dare I say, like book of church order, something that tells you, hey, here's how we go about this. And you need to have accountability within the system where you have a way, you have a means of appeal when there are these kinds of problems. And so I want to say that, again, influence in itself is not bad, right? Branding in itself is not bad. Like growing in notoriety is definitely not a bad thing. That can be a fine thing, and it can be a blessing from God. It really can be. But there is this unnatural, disorderly, and chaotic means of attaining these things or using these things. And this is, I think, what we are talking about when we talk about celebrity culture. And so here, I want to read from 1 Timothy 3 when it's talking about the qualifications for elders in the church. 1 Timothy 3, verse 1 says this: "The saying is trustworthy. If anyone aspires to the office of overseer or elder, he desires a noble task." And you see here, like this desire to be, say, a leader in the church, this aspiration to be in a position of influence, that in itself, like that is an aspiration toward a noble thing, right? That goal is noble. Now, if you said your aspiration is to be able to, get to the point where enough people know me that, I'm able to lead them astray in some way. Obviously, nobody does that self-consciously. Well, maybe there are some who are doing it self-consciously, but for the most part, people who begin to teach something that is false, they often really believe it. So they wouldn't put it that way. But obviously, if you were aspiring that kind of influence in that way, or if you said you were aspiring to a place of influence so that others would love you more and look to you more, and you could grow in your glory, that you could be glorified all the more. Obviously, we would say that's super problematic. But to aspire to a role of influence and leadership in the church is not necessarily a bad thing, but it has to be for the ends of God's glory, right? So it's you are just a part of the instrument whereby you are giving glory to God. You are building up the church. The end goal isn't for you, right? The end goal is not you. The end goal has to be outside of you, right? For the building up of the church as defined in the word, right? You are leading others to something else. And I think toward that end, this has to be something that it has to be more organic too. And this is where the danger of branding can come in. If you have not proven yourself in your family life, why should anybody else follow you or lead you? This is actually the logic that Paul uses in 1 Timothy 3, right? If an elder has not proved himself, if a man has not proved himself in his household, how could he be put in charge of the household of God? And I think maybe even beyond that, if you haven't proven yourself in your household and you haven't proven yourself in the household of God, why should you have influence or say anywhere else, right? If your church is a mess, then why should you have any say in how someone else's church is run? That's just not for you, you've not proven yourself to get to that point. And even just saying that requires that you have a way of judging those things, of being able to be aware of those things, almost like having, leaders of the church who are accountable to others in graded courts.
Right. Well, it's whether or not you're following the details of ecclesiology well, it is, right, it's a noble task. Why? Because to pursue it is, you are saying, I'm putting aside a lot of other pursuits I could have. And I would say part of the acceptance of the task in church leadership is the cultural expectations of celebrity, right? That'd be a good thing for us to think about. But why does it have to come, right? Why do you need to prove yourself? Why are these standards? Why am I accountable? Why does there need to be these exterior things? Why does it even need this level? Does it need to be organic? Because who is the only head of the church? Who is the only king and ruler of the church? It's Jesus Christ is the exclusive king of the church. And so all who serve in it serve at his pleasure and for his purposes and for his namesake. Please leave a 5-star review and join us next time for more Restless.